where do I want to begin? Where do I want to have this safety boundary? And it's almost like this imaginary line that you create for yourself. And you say to yourself like, hey, if I keep this boundary, this is what makes me feel safe. This is what I need in my life in order for me to feel safe, in order for me to know like this is important to me. Beautiful queens, welcome to our podcast. This is podcast number 2, and we're going to talk today about boundaries. And I have Cindy with me today. So welcome, Cindy.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. So excited to have you here. So this is, we actually have gotten some questions from the women. And if you've been following us, if you just started following us, we have a Facebook group that is called Born to be a Queen. And you could be, request to come into the Facebook group. And in there, we get to have this place of safety, of vulnerability, and we get to ask these questions, whatever is that you're going through. It's an awesome experience for us to share that, for us to ask questions, because the more that you ask those questions, the more that we get to learn. And it's not just you, like whoever listens to that, whoever gets to interact within that, it's so profound and it's so beautiful. So I want to thank you for the women that have shared questions. And because you have asked and because you have shared, we actually get to answer the questions today. So these are a couple questions that we've gotten from the Facebook page, and we want to take the time to answer them now. We find ourselves in our beautiful Queen's Corner, and it's at the comfort of my home. And we are surrounded by so much beauty. And I just want to thank you for you being here and for you listening. And wherever you find yourself, I hope that you could feel the love, that you could feel God's grace around you, because it's always around us if we just take the time to really consciously connect to that. So without further ado, let's begin, and let's start asking some questions that are really important right now for us to start.
Yes. Okay, so first question, kind of going around boundaries that we got was, what people want to know from you, Vivian, what challenges have come up for you when you've tried to create a boundary? And like, how do you set them? They're like, this is brand new to them. They're really confused about like even somewhat of like the definition of a boundary, and how can that really even be something that they can start to implement to their lives.
Okay. So boundaries, I feel like it's something that we often don't have. We don't create them. Like I didn't have boundaries for myself just because I didn't feel like it was necessary. And when somebody asked me like, well, do you have any boundaries? Have you set any boundaries with your spouse? And pretty much the answer, if I'm being honest, was like, no, I really didn't take the time to consciously write something down and know that this is where I begin and he ends, like it was just all one big mush. So I feel like boundaries are a way for us to know like, where do I want to begin? Where do I want to have this safety boundary? And it's almost like this imaginary line that you create for yourself. And you say to yourself like, hey, if I keep this boundary, this is what makes me feel safe. This is what I need in my life in order for me to feel safe, in order for me to know like this is important to me. And when I started to write those things, and if you want to begin somewhere in where you are in life, setting up some boundaries for yourself, begin with a boundary on time. Begin with the boundary on energy. Begin with the boundary on your, physical and emotional levels. And maybe even just taking it back and just starting with time, and I'll give you an example. My husband is an amazing man, high level entrepreneur that is always going 100 miles. And when he comes home, he likes to really like unwind and watch TV and watch documentaries or whatever, anything on TV. That's his thing. But for me, it wasn't, and it never really is. And I would step over my boundaries, and I would go and I would lay down with him because he asked me, I wanted to spend time with him. I wanted to cuddle. And I would lay down next to him and not waste. Listen, let's not use that word because I liked being there, but it was just nothing that I wanted to do, nothing that nourished me. So it would overstep the boundary on my time. And then I would go to bed later than I expected. I didn't do my nightly routine. I didn't get to take care of myself. And then I would feel resentful towards him because he called me, because he took my time, but it had nothing to do with him. It had to do with me. I was not clear on my boundary on time when I decided to say like, hey, listen, sleep is so important to me right now, especially where I am in life right now. Like I need to sleep a certain amount of hours and I can't stay here with you. Like I could cuddle with you for a little bit, but my boundary on sleep, my boundary on my night routine is more important right now. Not more important than you, but more important to me right now. And when I was clear on that, he was okay with it. It was nothing to do with him. So sometimes we don't set the boundaries because we're afraid that we are going to hurt the other person, or we're not going to feel the love or feel the, reciprocate the love and the right intention. But it was the opposite. He actually honored that part in me and made it a priority for me. It's like, okay, so now he knows. He doesn't call me at night. He'll look for me like earlier, or we have conversations, or we sit down out here in our atrium and we just cuddle. So it's really allowing yourself to ask yourself, and I'll give you this 3 things. How much are you going to allow, to tolerate, and to accommodate in your life? And I don't know where I heard that, but when I heard, because there's so many great books about this, and you should pick one up because I'm no expert at boundaries. Like I'm still learning. But when I read that, it just resonated so much that I could still remember till now, like a couple of years later. It's like, how much do you allow? How much do you tolerate? And how much do you accommodate? Isn't that so true?
It's so true. Yeah. I'm just thinking about several different stories that I've personally heard. I've had my own struggle with creating boundaries for myself, but one that sticks in my mind is just, there's even an element of when you don't step in and claim a boundary, you could actually be hurting someone, but by not allowing them to do what they need to do. So you're actually getting in the way. So for example, I knew of a friend who was, had a cousin or something living with her. And she really wanted to see her grow and help her, aid her in this time of development where she was struggling. But she kind of was just getting comfortable rather than doing the things that she needed to do. So then she was going back and forth in her head. It was starting to impact her family and their relationship because someone else was in the house. And she just felt all this pressure. But then she spoke to me and said that she actually sat and meditated, prayed about it, and got a message from God. And God had said, you're trying to play my part in this. You're actually not allowing this person to flourish because you're letting her stay here. So you have to help her to leave the nest. So it's just there's so many different ways that if you don't set boundaries, what could then happen? There's consequences.
Yes. And I would say even boundaries are part of that self-respect, self-love. And it allows you to start again, if you are just beginning your journey and starting this journey for yourself, ask yourself, what makes you feel loved? What makes you feel safe? What makes you feel comfortable? And when you start to answer those questions, and from that place with the best intention, because we're not here to hurt the other person. You're really here to help yourself and to know what makes you feel loved, what makes you feel safe. And from that place, it's well, how do I create this boundary? Right.
Right.
And boundaries and time are so important. We overstep our boundaries all the time. And I talked about that imaginary line because that line is imaginary, because that line nobody sees. I feel we keep erasing it and then moving again and erasing it and move it again. Yes. But I want you to really make that line from a place of authentically knowing what you need in your life right now. And one of the things that makes a boundary come alive, be true, and be held in your own ways is you actually have to tell it. You have to say it out loud to the other person. Because if you don't speak your boundary, that one, the other person doesn't know, duh. And two is like, it doesn't come into fruition. It doesn't grow. It's not the reality of things. So I think it's super important for us to really speak them out loud.
Yeah, 100%. And I feel like also, I heard someone once say this to me about creating a boundary for myself. They were just guiding me through something, and they shared, your boundary doesn't have to be created with barbed wire.
Oh, yeah, that's so true.
It doesn't have to be something that's gonna, you're intentionally hurting someone. It can be, made with flowers, made with love. So that there's lots of different ways of going about it. It doesn't have to be painful or hurtful.
And once you have established your boundary, I think it's super important, one, for you to voice them, right? To like say what your boundary is. And then the third thing I would say that you really need to acknowledge if the other person is helping you keep that boundary. Because in this instance, like I gave you the example with my husband, he honored that part in me. He made it a priority too, and he didn't have to. So when I said thank you to him, like, it's not that I don't love you. It's not that I don't want to spend time with you. It's just like, I need to honor this part in me right now. And he actually loved that acknowledgement that I gave him. And then when I come up with another boundary, then he'll be okay to accept it. Right. Because here's another thing, like when we come up with boundaries, it's not always per se like people are going to be happy with what you have to say, right? No. They're not going to say like, well, yeah, sure, I'll keep all your boundaries. I'm so into that too. Some people are not going to like it. No. Some people are not going to accept them. And it's up to you to know what you want in your life, what you want in your relationship, and how do you want it to be for it to be there, for the boundary to really have taken that place.
Right.
So I want to give you this illustration that I love for myself when I set boundaries is imagine yourself just standing in a bridge. And this bridge is kind of like, the bridges when you go away and they're not to like code like we are here in the United States, but it's more like those bridges like in an island, right? Like the ones that are like a little shaky and you see like the ropes, it's coming a little undone, but you still want to take this leap of faith and step forward because you want to get to the other side because you see something so beautiful that's calling your attention. So boundaries are kind of like that to me. And it's something that you take a leap of faith in making them and, knowing how much you could allow, how much you could tolerate. And when you take that first step, sometimes it's scary. Sometimes it's something like you don't know if you want to have that. You don't know if you're going to hurt the other person. But the boundaries are those railings on the side that keep you from tipping over, from falling, from feeling like shaky. You hold on to those things and they help you get across. And when you get across to the other side, you actually could take a deep breath and say like, I made it. This feels so nice. I crossed over. Now there's this beautiful scenery that it's waiting for me. But you had to first take that step. You had to get through that bridge. And it's us going through those bridges over and over again that we could say like, this feels so nice in my life right now. It helps me. It keeps me in this line where I need to go.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think from your example, you have a better relationship now. Like
to yourself.
Yeah. To yourself.
Yeah.
And to him. Like there's so much more. You allow the resentment to go away. And then it's almost as if you're having some sort of expectation on someone. And that actually hurts your relationship. And while it's like a private thing between you, because he doesn't realize that, hey, but so I love that you were able to come through that and share it and that it was accepted. And again, while you said that it's not always, but
not always,
it's something that you must do for yourself.
That's right. That's right. So hopefully this is something that resonates. Boundaries is one of those topics that you could go on and on talking about it, fighting the idea, fighting the urge not to have them. But I would say just start with the one thing that you could do for yourself is really allowing yourself to take inventory of where in your life do you feel sometimes uncomfortable and unsafe, and take it from there, and then just kind of like flip it around and say like, well, maybe I need a boundary for this place in my life. And from there you can start. What I always tell my beautiful queens is allow yourself to find the one thing. What is the one thing that you could do to make that change? Don't overthink it. Don't make it too complicated. What is the one thing that you're willing to do today that can make an impact in your life today, tomorrow, and coming forth? So hopefully this is something that you resonate with, and just allow yourself and remember that you were born to be that queen that God created in you.